Hello, we're Big Dog Little Dog and welcome to our short video on stress, what it is and how best to manage it. Stress is the #1 cause of common mental health conditions like depression and anxiety-based disorders, and it's also the #1 trigger for mental health crises.
We all have a limit for how much stress we can take, and we like to use a metaphor to describe and be able to picture our stress vulnerability, and that metaphor is called the stress bucket.
Imagine, built into each of us, we have our own personal stress bucket. Some people may have a large stress bucket that can hold high levels of stress. Other people, more vulnerable to stress, would have a smaller stress bucket. Stress has come along in our lives and they cause stress to flow into our stress buckets.
On an average day, do you wake up with something already on your mind? If you do, there's already an amount of stress in your bucket. There are stressors at home. That might be the people that we live with, children, partners, parents. The journey to work. If I use public transport, I'm surrounded by people. Trains might be late, buses might be cancelled. If I drive, roadworks, traffic jams.
So we may even have a stress bucket that's half full before we even start our working day. And of course, once we're at work, other stresses come along that put more stress into our buckets. Tight deadlines, customers, colleagues, managers, staff. Then at the end of our working day, we have to deal with a commute back home. And then when we reach home, we may find the stresses that we were dealing with this morning waiting for us when we come back with an already full stress bucket.
We didn't add complexities such as bereavement, debt, relationship issues, housing issues. On just a normal working day, depending on the size of your bucket, depending on what's going on in your life, you can reach that point beyond your threshold, and that's never a good place to be. So we're going to go through two approaches now. One, to look at how can we limit the amount of stress that we're letting into our bucket. Two, how can we release stress out of our bucket.
We can do things that stop the stress flowing in, the proactive approach, and then we can have coping strategies, things that help us let the stress out, the reactive approach. And a combination of the two works well. So let's think about the first approach we can take. Stopping the stress flowing into our stress buckets in the first place. A little bit like putting a lid on the bucket. And different things that we can do to achieve that. Firstly, challenging. Think about the stressors, the things that are causing me to become stressed or distressed, and looking at those stressors and reducing or removing as many of those as possible. For example, if I have problems with finances and I get support with that, I've reduced or removed that stressor, so there'll be less stress flowing into my bucket.
Secondly, acceptance. Identifying what we're stressing about that we can't change. Imagine you're in a traffic jam. Maybe there's roadworks and you're becoming more and more frustrated because you're going to be late. Either turn around and find another route, or accept that there's nothing you can do right now. No amount of stress that you can generate right now is going to help in any way. So how can we identify those things that we can't change, accept them?
And the third way that we can look to put a lid on our stress bucket, proportioning. Taking time to reflect and ask ourselves, is the level of stress I'm experiencing here proportionate to the stressor that's in my life? And how often we find ourselves having an over-the-top response to something that's relatively small or minor in our lives.
Now let's have a look at how to get stress out of our bucket.
Very like putting a tap on the side of our stress bucket, there are things that we can do that are like opening the tap and letting the stress flow out. We call these things coping strategies. Sometimes we have positive coping strategies. Sometimes we fall into the trap of having negative coping strategies.
Smoking, alcohol, drugs, violence, self-harm are all examples.
We always recommend to people that it's easier to replace a harmful coping strategy with a positive, helpful one, rather than just trying to stop. Some examples of the positive ones: talking to a friend or a loved one, maybe taking time to look after your general health and well-being, exercise, yoga, meditation, or maybe activities that bring you pleasure and enjoyment in life.
Do a bit of a stock take of your stress bucket. How big or small is it? How vulnerable are you to stress? How good is your lid? How well can you choose not to stress about something? And what are your coping strategies like? How good is your tap? Check in during the day, ask yourself, how full is my bucket? Should I do something about it now? Thanks very much for watching.